time to say farewell to Pascal because a new sheriff is in town. After plenty of teasing and more than little controversy, it's time for NVIDIA to present their next generation Turing architecture to consumers and not just convention audiences. Hi, this is Tim from Vortez, and it's our pleasure to bring you the GeForce RTX 2080 Ti, the flagship of NVIDIA's 20 series, a new range of graphics cards that are based on a radically new architecture. It introduces new proprietary technologies which look set to change the face of gaming. However, today's card isn't just any 2080 Ti. For the first time in a long while, NVIDIA are launching both reference cards and partner variants of the flagship line simultaneously. This particular beauty is the ZOTAC Gaming GeForce RTX 2080 Ti Amp Edition, a model factory overclocked beyond NVIDIA's Founders Edition, and with ZOTAC's own triple fan cooler design, in a package that sits at the very apex of their range. We have reviewed a number of ZOTAC's Amp Edition cards over the years, and they have never disappointed. It will be fascinating to see what they can bring to the table this time around. That said, now we must come to the chief controversy of this launch. NVIDIA have priced the RTX 2080 Ti from £999 including VAT, and that MSRP is reflected in the pre-order pricing for all of the reference and partner variants of this series. In the UK, the ZOTAC Gaming RTX 2080 Ti Amp Edition has a pre-order price of £1,289, including VAT. That's competitive with other RTX 2080 Ti's, but of course represents an extremely heavy burden on your bank balance. Hopefully, the performance can match the premium. First up, let's take a very quick look at the features. As always, more information can be found in the written review that accompanies this video. Turing is a significant departure from the prior generation's somewhat derivative Pascal architecture. The shader module now incorporates not only familiar CUDA shaders, but also NVIDIA's new Tensor Core and RT Core technologies. They will be key to unlocking the processor's potential in applying the principles of deep learning neural networks and real-time ray tracing, and represent a new untapped resource for game developers to exploit. In the near term, however, we're all about conventional rendering. The TU102 GPU is at the heart of every RTX 2080 Ti. It's a huge die, 775mm squared in fact, the largest consumer GPU die ever produced. It is manufactured using TSMC's 12nm process, improving power efficiency properties over Pascal. In this SKU, 68 shader models are active for a total of 4,352 CUDA cores. Even setting aside other improvements, that's 20% more cores than even the GTX 1080 Ti. Augmented by 11GB of GDDR6 VRAM clocked at 14GB per second, and a 354-bit memory bus for a total bandwidth of 616GB per second, that's a hell of a lot of horsepower to throw at high-end 4K rendering. And now time for a closer look at the ZOTAC Gaming RTX 2080 Ti Amp Edition. Unsurprisingly, it's a pretty large beast thanks to the triple fan design, but that gives them the opportunity to show off the ZOTAC Gaming livery. We should however quickly mask our sadness that the yellow flare to the livery is now gone, and move on. The shroud style is far more subtle than many of the brand's competitors, and especially NVIDIA's reference design. As a result, it would serve well those who seek a GPU which blends in with the rest of the system rather than appears as the centerpiece of their build. The toned-down colouring matches the subtle styling of the shroud, and for once this GPU almost totally dodges the scourge of RGB lighting. On this model, only the ZOTAC Gaming insignia on the edge lights up. Light and colouring effects are controlled by the Firestorm utility, functionality that obviously will have more use on other ZOTAC models. So, just how big is this brute? Well, the precise measurements are 308mm long, 113mm wide, and 57mm thick. Technically, it's a 2.5 slot card. This is appreciably longer and slightly thicker than the Founders Edition, and care will have to be taken to ensure that your system chassis can accommodate the card. That's especially the case if you're installing into a small form factor PC. This GPU's 4300 CUDA cores are clocked at a solid 1350MHz base, which appears to be common across all RTX 2080 Ti's. The boost clock, however, reaches a lofty 1665MHz, a couple of bins higher than even the pre-overclocked Founders Edition, and over 100MHz faster than NVIDIA's reference spec. The Amp Edition's 11GB of GDDR6 memory remains at reference speeds, 14GB per second effective. And yes, you heard right, GDDR6. The 20 series eschews the GDR5X of the prior generation to move on to the very latest memory specification, a process which has no doubt also impacted its overall cost. However, it brings with it a healthy boost in memory bandwidth, which should help a great deal at the highest resolutions and image quality settings. Could this be a real consistent 4K 60 frames per second card? We'll have to wait and see. And of course, the RTX 2080 Ti is also PCI Express 3.0 compliant, DirectX 12.1 ready, and supports OpenGL 4.6 as well as Vulkan 1.1. With this generation, it's time to say farewell to the bulky DVI connector, which makes for plenty of venting on the rear PCI bracket. Connectivity hasn't been overlooked, however. The card features the RTX 2080 Ti's standard complement of 3 DisplayPort 1.4a ports. A total of 4 monitors are supported simultaneously. A new addition with the RTX 20 series is that USB Type-C connector. This port is not only a fully fledged USB 3.1 Type-C connector, but also acts as a Virtual Link connector for VR head-mounted displays. Virtual Link is a single cable solution for VR that delivers 4 HDR3 DisplayPort lanes, USB 3.1, and up to 27 watts of power. Its inclusion is forward-thinking. Currently no HMD on the market supports Virtual Link. In the meantime, however, you can never have too many USB ports. Located on the top of the card are 2 8-pin PCI Express power connectors, there to feed this hungry beast its due. Nominally, the RTX 2080 Ti has a TDP of 250 watts, the same as the GTX 1080 Ti, identifying it as a power-hungry beast. ZOTAC's AMP edition, however, pushes the boundary still further, up to 285 watts TDP. ZOTAC recommends a good quality 650 watt PSU to power this graphics card, and we can certainly see where they're coming from. Our power consumption tests indicated that it draws 100 watts more at peak load than the 1080 Ti Founders Edition, a hefty consequence of all that extra performance potential. Staying at the top edge, the RTX 2080 Ti also features a new set of SLI connectors. NVIDIA are transitioning to their proprietary NVLink standard for the communication between 2 GPUs, nixing the high bandwidth SLI update of the previous generation. NVLink SLI has substantially higher bidirectional bandwidth even than high bandwidth SLI, and as a result is better able to support higher display resolutions. NVLink SLI also scales with the class of GPU. On dual RTX 2080s, for example, up to 8K display topologies are supported, while 2 RTX 2080 Ti's have enough bandwidth to support 8K surround. Support for these more exotic resolutions will be in a post-launch driver. NVLink bridges are sold separately by NVIDIA and selected partners. Flipping the card over, we can take a closer look at its backplate. In this instance, it's remarkably plain, with only the ZOTAC Gaming logo and Live to Game moniker getting a shout-out. In terms of cooling, the entire backplate should serve as a heat spreader for rear-mounted components, while a cutout around the GPU socket offers a small amount of venting in that zone. From this angle, it's also clear just how much the shroud and heatsink overhangs the end of the PCB. This oversized cooling solution is high-end but conventional. ZOTAC aren't seeking to reinvent the wheel here, after all. Central to this design are 3 11-blade 90mm axial fans, which have a tweaked fin profile to better direct airflow. Thanks to ZOTAC's active fan control system, these fans turn independently, and airflow is strengthened where it's needed rather than across the entire heatsink equally. 5 8mm copper heat pipes draw heat away from the GPU and other toasty components, towards the actively cooled edges of the heatsink. On top of the PCB, a metal plate acts as a heat spreader for surface-mounted components, and also increases the card's rigidity. This solution keeps the GPU at a cool 55 to 60 centigrade under load, which is impressive given the card's power draw and performance characteristics. Given the early stage of the 20 series lifecycle, it will come as no surprise that this card makes use of NVIDIA's reference PCB and layout. It will therefore be compatible with aftermarket water blocks made for the NVIDIA reference design. And of course, the PCB is held rigid not only by the backplate, but also the faceplate over front-mounted components. That's quite important if you want to minimise any flex created by the weight of that huge cooler. This card's power delivery system utilises the same next-generation 13-phase power delivery of the reference design, helping to maintain higher clock speeds and increase overall stability. In order to improve efficiency, the card can switch off individual phases when power draw is low, a new novel design tweak implemented in the 20 series by NVIDIA. And finally, a tight-up shot of the huge TU102 GPU. It's a massive hunk of silicon that goes some way to explaining the price of the card. Expect to see quite a few of these, accompanied by the wistful sighing of onlooking gamers, in the coming months. Okay, so now we're going to jump into some games to test out the performance of this new card. Let's see how it can handle some of the latest AAA titles. For each we'll use a compromised resolution of 1440p and Ultra for the detail preset. For more resolutions and comparisons against other cards, head over to the full review. While we have these games running, we'll also use GPU-Z in the background to pick up on the max temperature and see how good that cooler really is. Okay, and coming out of the last game now, let's check GPU-Z and see how effective that cooler was. And there we have the result. And there we have ZOTAC Gaming's RTX 2080 Ti Amp Edition, a card which is probably going to go straight into our personal Hall of Fame. But before that, let's break down our thoughts on this new paragon of performance. The first point to note, in case you were wondering, is that this card mechanically is just like any other. It's a bit large, but the end user won't need some sort of exotic system configuration to leverage it just like any other high-performance GPU. And that's as it should be. This isn't a Titan or Quadro class GPU after all. Currently, there are no genuine competitors to this new class of GPU, either in price or performance. It sits astride the throne and laughs at those before it, even before the new weapons in its arsenal are brought to bear. It's hard to see anything surpassing it in the near future, and even a Turing-based Titan with a whole TU102 GPU enabled is probably some time away. But let's not linger too long on that thought. While certainly providing a performance boost over the GTX 1080 Ti at 1440p, and yet again pushing forward the image quality of systems targeting 144Hz gameplay at that resolution, 4K will be where this card really shines. Many have claimed the possibility of 4K 60Hz gaming, but none have delivered this early with the promise of better drivers and new technologies to come. We are preempting the written review a little here, but this card is the first to offer us consistently playable frame rates at ultra settings and 4K resolution. Furthermore, deep learning supersampling in particular is an exciting technology that will improve image quality leaps and bounds without the usual performance impact of traditional anti-aliasing techniques. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait a while for that in actual games. And waiting is certainly something of a theme for the GeForce RTX cards right now. The new technologies, real-time ray tracing and DLSS, are still just on the horizon, but not yet here. Their promise is immense, but AAA games won't be offering full ray traced rendering in this generation. Until we see how games with hybrid rendering look, that is to say a mixture of rasterization and ray traced rendering, we're inevitably seeing an incomplete picture. That would be fine if these cards were more affordable. Taking a punt on a $600 flagship is slightly easier to swallow than one that is priced at double that. But until that time, a full-throated recommendation cannot be given. Now that being said, how about ZOTAC's implementation? Well, simply put, it's great. The card is quiet under load, unobtrusive in its looks, and only has a minimum of RGB if you don't find that particularly important. We have no other RTX 2080 Ti's to compare it against as yet, but based on specs, performance should be ahead of the Founded Edition at least. Temperature results at load also indicate that there is some overclocking headroom, and we'll see how much in the written review. The £1,250 price tag, however, makes it an extremely considered purchase. In some games you might see a double-digit improvement in performance versus a GTX 1080 Ti, while in others, frame rates might double. It's far easier to make the case if you're seeking to push the boundaries of 1440p 144Hz or 4K 60Hz gaming, but much harder if you're still satisfied with the performance from your GTX 1080 Ti. All in all, consider your system as a whole, especially your monitor, and assess whether you can take advantage of the horsepower or laying down half its cost on a new G-Sync panel is a better purchase. In summary, the ZOTAC Gaming RTX 2080 Ti is without question the fastest GPU we've ever tested, and doesn't even seem stretched taking the crown. Even without the implementation of core NVIDIA RTX technologies, the card makes a strong case for gaming at the edge of the performance envelope, with enthusiasts no doubt salivating over the thought of getting their hands on one. The sole disappointment we have is that at almost £1,300, this performance will be out of reach for the majority of gamers for a long time to come. So guys, thanks for watching today. Be sure to check out that full review, which will be on screen and in the description very soon. Take care, and I'll talk to you guys next time.